So, topic 10 of Unit 2 is on the causes of migration. So, why people not just migrate internationally between countries, but why they migrate within their own country as well. So, your objective for topic 10 is to explain how different causal factors encourage migration. Migration is usually divided into push factors and pull factors. So the causes of migration are usually divided into push factors and pull factors. Push factors are things that push you away from an area. Sounds pretty self-explanatory. And pull factors are things that draw you into an area. So push factors would be a reason that I decided to move out of the United States, but there are so many other countries I can move to. So the pull factors would be the reason that I chose a certain country to go to. And these things can take different shapes. Push and pull factors, can be cultural, can be demographic, can be economic, environmental, or political. So any of those types of factors can be the reason someone leaves somewhere or decides to go somewhere else. So what I want you to do is press pause on this video for a second, go to pages 74 through 76 in the textbook, and find some examples of each type of push and pull factor. Add those to your notes and then come back and finish the video. Now, migration consists of more than just push and pull factors. Push and pull factors are the initial forces that get migration kind of going. However, migrating is not that easy. It's not just, okay, I don't like it here for these reasons, I like it over there for those reasons, and then I'm just going to move there. There are things called intervening obstacles, which are barriers that make reaching their desired destination more difficult. This is Lee's model of migration that you see on the screen right here. And this was developed to kind of show you or illustrate more clearly what the migration process looks like besides just push and pull factors. So you have the origin country and then the destination country, the receiving country of the migrants. You can see that the origin country has more push factors, more negatives than it does positives. The destination has more positive factors, pull factors, than it has negative factors. So this migrant decides, okay, I want to leave here and I want to go here. But there are obstacles in between where they are and where they want to go. And just like push and pull factors, intervening obstacles can kind of be divided into different categories. They can be economic, social, political, or environmental. And here are some examples of those. An economic intervening obstacle might be that a migrant lacks enough money to reach a destination. So they can recognize the push factors of their origin country and they recognize the pull factors of where they want to go. That doesn't mean those push and pull factors aren't there, but they just don't have enough money to get there. So that would be one example of an economic intervening obstacle. A social intervening obstacle. A migrant gets married to someone who lives along the migration route and settles in that person's community. So the way migration works, oftentimes, especially if people are moving long distances, like across the world, they won't make that move in one trip. And so they'll kind of move from place to place until they get there. It's one of the patterns that is seen in migration. And so someone along their migration route might meet somebody, get married, and decide to live in a place that's different from their origin country, obviously, but is not necessarily where they were planning on going. A political intervening obstacle. A migrant cannot get a visa to enter a country. Maybe there's a ban on that country. Maybe that country isn't, maybe he's not educated enough to enter that country because there are certain restrictions. Maybe the country that he's trying to go to has already met their quota on immigration for the year, so they're not allowed in. That would be a political intervening obstacle. And then an environmental intervening obstacle. A migrant cannot cross sea, desert, or a mountain range because it's too difficult. and maybe they don't have the means um, to do that otherwise, and they would have to walk or something like that. Things like the ocean and the sea are pretty major. Things like mountain ranges or deserts, yeah, that happens. But a lot of people today do have like cars or things like that to get across that. But like things like the ocean, not everybody has a boat. And not everyone can afford a plane ticket. And so the sea, the ocean is a pretty big environmental intervening obstacle. Um, Migration has been going on since the beginning of time. People move, people go places. And so it's been studied by geographers. And this man named E.G. Ravenstein, which he's German, so maybe it's Ravenstein, I don't really know. But he came up with 8 patterns or laws on migration tendencies, patterns, and demographics. So that he kind of observed these things. Some of them have been modified from his original thoughts because times change, but they still form the basis of like basic migration theory. So his first law was that most migrants travel only a short distance. And that matches up with what we know about distance decay. The further something is away, the less likely you are to interact with it. Um, that matches the theory of distance decay, that most migrants only travel a short distance. Migration proceeds step by step. That's called step migration, which is what I just mentioned. How most migration across the world doesn't happen in one trip. They often stop in between places, kind of maybe gather their resources or supplies again. Maybe they stay a couple months, raise some more money, and then they continue their trip. The third law, migrants going long distances generally go to large urban economic centers. A large urban economic center is a fancy terminology for a big city. If a migrant is going to travel thousands and thousands of miles, they're probably not going to settle in the middle of nowhere. They're looking for something specific. They're looking for jobs. They're looking for places for their family. They're looking for opportunity. And that's going to be found much more easily in the large cities. So, migrants traveling long distances usually end up in large cities. The fourth law, each migration stream produces a compensating counter stream called counter migration. This law, honestly, is the hardest for me to grasp because I guess I don't see it, but it does happen. So it is said that although, like for example, in the 2000s, there was a large stream of Central American migrants moving to the United States, but at the same time, there were people from the United States also moving into Central America. That example is also found in your book, I think, as well. The fifth law of migration is that natives of large urban areas, so cities, are less likely to migrate than those living in rural areas. And that is simply because of opportunity. People living in large cities pretty much have all the opportunity to do what they need to do or what they want to do. People living in rural areas, what they want to do, what they dream of doing, may not be in the place that they're living. So that is why people who live in large cities are more likely to migrate than people living, or less likely to migrate than people living in rural areas. Most migration, the sixth law, most migration is rural to urban, which kind of matches law number 3 and 5. Um, More people are moving from rural areas to cities than people are moving from cities to rural areas, for the reasons that we've already discussed. Law number 7, most migrants are young adults between 20 and 45. And that's simply because those are the working people. Those are the people looking for opportunity. And also, um, there could be a good portion of this group that don't have very many children or don't have children at all. And so they're not tied down to a certain place and they can migrate. And then the eighth law, most international migrants are young males, while more internal migrants are females. And the reason for that is that most men or most international migrants are traveling for work, and men are more willing to do that. If you did like the Qatar or the Bahrain population pyramid, when we annotated them, you saw this in the pattern. There was a lot of male migrants to those places because of the oil field, where more internal migrants are female, which means they're moving within their own country. And that's generally because they would move where their husband lives. I guess I'm actually an example of that. I was an internal migrant. I did not live here, but I got married, and so I moved here. So those are just 8 patterns that migration generally follow. So that should kind of frame your thinking when we're talking about migration. If I ask you, I mean, can you identify any migration patterns? This is where your brain should go. So go ahead and summarize these notes at the bottom of your page and move on to topic 11.